Tēnā koutou, i ngā mana, i ngā reo, i ngā karangaranga maha, tēnā koutou. Te mana whenua o tēnei takiwa, te atiawa, ka mihi atu au ki a koutou. Koutou kua tai mai ngā pito o te whenua, he mihi mahana, he mihi whānui ki a koutou katoa. Ka mihi hoki au ki ngā kai whakahaere o tēnei hui, Catherine Ma, Jane, ka mihi au hoki ki a koutou. He mihi mahana, he mihi whānui ki a koutou katoa. Ko tōku nei ingoa, ko Lesley Rameka, no Ngāti Raukawa me Ngāti Tukurihia hau. Ko tōku whānau, te kaumā rima o ku mokopuna, tētahi great mokopuna. So, ka tū whakahihi au ki te kōrero ki a koutou o tēnā. My name's Lesley. I am up until, as Jane was saying, up until January 31st was a senior lecturer at Waikato University, and am now semi-retired, supposedly. I start on the 5th of March as a senior research fellow at the university, so we'll be at Waikato University, so we'll be doing some work in research, which is the work that I really enjoy. I want to acknowledge my fellow writers and just to kind of say that we had, it was hard work, but we had such a great team. We really kind of worked together. Brenda Suter and I were there to look at the bicultural, bilingual aspects of Te Whāriki, and that was the focus of our work, although we did do bits of other work on the project, but it was, the specific area was bicultural perceptions, bicultural perspectives within Te Whāriki. I want to take you back, because what I want to do is acknowledge the original writers. They did a great job for the time. You know, like I looked at Te Whāriki now, the 1996, and I can see great big holes in it. And I can see areas that the language and some of it, but that's looking 20 years on, you know. So at the time, if we look at the time in the 1980s and 1990s, this idea that the whole social equity agenda was kind of being overrun by other agendas, which were more kind of a consumerist approach, where early childhood was seen as a kind of a domestic issue rather than something that we should be looking at as a government. Education, especially early childhood, was looked at as the parents' responsibility, and you could just buy services. That's the whole kind of right-wing ideas. We have to acknowledge that Margaret Carr and Helen May were fundamental to actually putting Te Whāriki together, to actually not following that approach. And so it's Margaret Carr and May argued that Te Whāriki was developed as much to protect the interests of children before school as it was to promote and define a curriculum. They believed that what we could have got was something pushed down from school, primary schools, and also that it would be like packages that you could buy here and there. And they were very concerned about that. But one of the key things about Te Whāriki in that time was that they were always committed to the Treaty of Waitangi and to the bicultural focus, producing something that honoured the treaty. So the differences, and there's some general differences. One was the socio-cultural focus, which for Māori was really a positive move. It's the move away from the developmental kind of pies, you know, the physical, the intellectual, the emotional kind of thing. I remember when I was first in Kohanga, we did assessment and we got these sheets from the kindergarten down the road, and we had to kind of tick, I mean, probably well before any of you were there, but we had to tick what they could do, so what they could hide. Oh, you were there? Yeah, you remember them? Yeah, and so we had to tick, and so what really the assessment showed was what children couldn't do. It was it wasn't looking at culture, wasn't looking at the social environment at all. So Te Whāriki brought those in, which was going against, you know, the kind of norm at the time, going against some of the approaches that were being initiated. It was non-prescriptive in that there was a weaving of community, the centres were weaving their curriculum. It was child-centred philosophy. Actually, back in the 80s, it would not have been. Introduced the concept of learning, dispositions, working theories, etc. So Sarah Farquhar makes a point, and I think this is a really good quote. As a first curriculum for early childhood in Aotearoa, and indeed one of the first internationally, it is remarkable that in an era of right-wing conservatism, in the 90s, the document was able to capture the spirit of feminism, Māori sovereignty, children's rights and educational theories at the same time as transversing the path of acceptance. This is a key thing because it went against the grain of what was happening at that time. It was the first bicultural curriculum in New Zealand, and it contained some aspects of Part B, which was specifically for kohanga reo. So in some of the statements, there were some statements in there in Te Whāriki that were quite powerful. For example, decisions about the ways in which bicultural goals and practices are developed within each early childhood setting should be in consultation with the appropriate tangata whenua. It's the first time that tangata whenua were kind of included or even thought to be part of, you know, the requirement for early childhood in many ways. I do want to mihi to them and to Tilly and Tamati Riri, who were the, you know, co-writers of Te Whāriki. It was a document, a cutting-edge document for the time. There's been a number of evaluations with Te Whāriki within and seeing how Te Whāriki has been working, and mostly they're showing that although Te Whāriki is out there, the implementation is not there, wasn't there. And I think that's one of the kind of impetuses for this refresh in terms of, for example, partnership with whānau Māori in early childhood services, ERO's report. It states that unfortunately most centres demonstrated limited partnership with whānau Māori. 90% did not work in partnership with whānau Māori and expected that Māori children and their whānau would fit in to the centre's culture. Some made deficit assumptions about why Māori were not involved, such as claiming that Māori did not value education. This was in 2012, it wasn't that long ago. Others expressed views that demonstrated their lack of understanding of whānau skills, knowledge and expertise, such as whānau are incapable of helping with learning. And the professional leaders in these services were driven by the notion that all children and families must be treated the same. And this is a kind of the way of thinking that's been around for a long time, but it's not the kind of thinking that we need now. This is not the way, you know, that we would want Te Whāriki 2017 to be enacted, or not, if that might be more the case. Working with Te Whāriki 2013, what they said, what ERO said, was that many services made reference to Te Reti o Waitangi, dual heritage, bicultural practice, but it wasn't actually seen in practice. It was at the philosophical, theoretical level. And so the realising of it was not happening. And often bicultural practices meant the use of basic te reo, some waiata, resources such as puzzles that depicted te ao Māori and posters and photographs, and some celebrations. And I think that's because that's the top level of culture. That's the easy stuff. That's the kind of stuff that people will take because it's easy to sing a song. It's easy to get some puzzles that are marae. You don't have to talk about it, you don't have to understand it. Even when you sing the songs, you don't have to understand it. You can just sing the words. So that I think in many ways tends still to be the level of practice. So for us, moving into the 2017, there were a number of things that I think were important, that the changes. There's a lot, but I'm only going to talk about a few. The first one, I think, is the recognition of Te Whāriki a te kohanga reo. It used to be Part B. And it used to be like it's about 5 or 6 pages. Now we have a whole section of the curriculum that is the flip book, which actually really highlights those aspects of Te Whāriki. I mean, I think for most people it's kind of not accessible, but it is still there for the kohanga reo. And it showcased the kind of unique bicultural, bilingual, 2 pathways curriculum. Key for me is that it has equal status with Te Whāriki that we are looking at. It exemplifies the authenticity of the kaupapa, te reo, tikanga and guidance. And I feel I didn't have anything to do with that because that was the kohanga reo, but I feel really proud that it's there and it's done. One of the things that Brenda and I was really important for us was that we would introduce as much reo Māori as we could into the document in an integrated way, so that it wasn't just kind of throw in here and throw in there, that it was actually part of the written material. We looked at things such as the stronger promotion of te reo in terms of using Māori words such as kaiako. We did actually have a long discussion about what we would call, because there were teachers, and then there was well, no, not everyone can, say they're teachers, and then practitioners and pedagogues, and a whole range, and then kaiako became the word that seemed to fit the best, and so that was great. It was great. Mokopuna being used for children. This is kind of adding in language in an integrated way. The strands of Te Whāriki have not only the strand name, like for example belonging, and then the Māori name, but there are excerpts of language in there that can be accessed if possible. And then the learning outcomes. All the learning outcomes have a Māori terms as well with them, and that is to help kind of integrate some of the language into early childhood, normal early childhood practice. The tikanga, for Māori, an inclusive curriculum is founded on Māori values and principles, strengths-based. Kaiako seek to develop mutually positive relationships with mokopuna and to work with whānau to realise high expectations. There's lots of statements like this that are extremely positive, and they kind of provide messages for people. The key to this, I think, is the success as Māori. Mason Jury's thinking around to live as Māori, to proactively participate as citizens of the world, and to enjoy good health and high standards of living. These were important things for us, important aspects. Looking at Māori concepts, one of the things I think for me is when I'm looking at that is that although when I showed you some of the statements that were in the 1996 edition, there was some statements, but there wasn't anything that would really support teachers to actually enact it. It was like the theory, but without the examples or the actions that could go with that. And so I think for us it was really important to actually, and I'm not going to read all of that, but to actually say, here's the theory, but there needs to be some examples, some ways of looking at things, so teachers can enact those. I believe that most early childhood teachers want to enact a bicultural curriculum. The issue for them is that for many is they don't know how. They've got their statements, but that's not enough. Having more kind of concepts explained is really important. I think this one here is looking at Māori perspectives, thinking. This statement looks at Māori ways of seeing babies. See, infants and toddlers, for example. Infants and toddlers is not a term that would fit a Māori perspective of young children. So we're kind of looking at this. Māori use a range of phrases in the development of the mokopuna. Piripoho refers to the act of breastfeeding. So a piripoho is one that is still breastfeeding.
While feeding the baby, the pepe is held close to the heart where they are able to safely observe the surroundings and begin their thing. Ko naku naku, mokopunu have progressed to eating solids, naku naku. So these and are physically mobile. Ko hunga hunga is another term. So these are terms that kind of see the infant and toddler in a different way. It's all about food. So it's about their ideas about growth and that are around what they can do. And much of that, there's the mouth feeding and some of those things that we were looking at as well. But it does give you a little bit of a different perspective of infants and toddlers. The whakatauki, that was really important, I think. The whakatauki for us was a way of deepening understandings, to ask people to reflect on what they mean. And so you'll see the whakatauki woven through much of te whāriki, but they are very strong, powerful messages. He purupura I rui a mai I rangiatea kore ngaro. The child is a seed sown in rangiatea, so will never be lost. I am the seed sown in rangiatea, so I will never be lost. So this rangiatea, the homeland, our homeland. Tū mai e moko te whakaata o matua, te moko o tupuna. Stand strong, o moko, the reflection of your parents, the blueprint of your ancestors. So the child is imbued with these characteristics, these essences, these powers that have come through from ancestors. So that is a kind of way of talking about or introducing ideas that may not be there. The thing is about whakatauki is that they were it was about traditional knowledge that was handed down. Whakatauki are very powerful. Mead and Grove talk about it being akin to a communication with tupuna. Through whakatauki, one is able to gain insight into what tupuna thought about life and what they valued. So it's ancient wisdom handed down. So it's really important that it is handed down to the generations that come. So Patterson says that whakatauki illuminate Māori law, constituting compelling reasons for acting in a particular way. So they're quite powerful. Another change, I think, is when I did look at the 1996 edition, all the Māori statements were right at the end of the page. So what we worked hard to do is bring them all up to the front and to the top. And you'll see across some of the examples that they are positioned. It's the positioning, the status and the integration that it's not an add-on. It's integrated through and it's important. And this is my final. There were a couple of other things that I think were really important for us. The kaupapa Māori theory within the theories section, because kaupapa Māori theory talks about normalisation of being Māori, Māori ways of knowing and being, Māori knowledge and Māori language and culture, and it expresses a way of moving forward. It's very powerful, and it was really important that it was there. The other one was kaupapa Māori assessment, which again situates the child and the whānau within the context of the Māori context, the Māori world. So for us, that was really important. Finally, the 2017 revision, it's the first in 20 years, as you know. We aimed to recognise the societal changes and the shifts, but the key thing is that it kept its original intention, and it's been developed and framed using concepts drawn from Te Ao Māori, and that was really important. That intention of Tilly and Tamati Redi, of Margaret Carr and Helen May, was kept and enhanced. The final thing I wanted, well, it's not I've got one other thing to say. I've just thought about it while you were talking before. But one of the key things for both Brenda and I was that Tamati and Tilly Redi would be happy with our work. So for Brenda and I, this is like, we kind of thought, okay, let's hear what they have to say. It was absolutely critical to us that they were happy with what we had done.
And so it was with a huge relief that they said, well done, girls. They called us girls. Well done, girls. You've done it well. And I thought, oh, thank goodness for that, But it was, from a Māori perspective, that was absolutely critical to be able to hold our heads up within the Māori world and say, that people were happy with it.